There is something that has always been here, before thought, before word, even before you realized you were realizing it. And the reality you experience, every detail of the world that seems to exist independently of you, depends entirely on the identity that observes it. Not what happens, but who is there when it happens. There is a presence that didn't arrive with you, and that won't go away when you sleep. It has no name, it has no form, but it's the only thing you know with absolute certainty exists, because she's the one who knows. The world seems to happen. Events unfold. Faces appear and disappear. Words arrive, linger for a moment, and then vanish. And in all of this, in every scene that life presents, there is something that observes, something that doesn't move. That something is you, not the you who thinks, not the you who feels fear or longing or urgency, not the you who checks the time, who plans, who worries about what others think. The other you, the one who was here before all of this began. You felt this before. That awkward moment when you catch yourself staring at your own hands, and for a moment you don't know who's looking. That second between waking up and remembering, when the name hasn't come back yet, when the list of worries hasn't been reorganized, when nothing has been labeled yet. Just presence, just here. Have you ever walked down a familiar street and suddenly felt like a stranger, as if the world were a stage and you were someone who had forgotten the role you were supposed to play? This feeling of strangeness is not madness. It's a crack, a small opening in the script. Most people, when they feel this way, retreat. They fill the silence with movement. They pick up their phone. They turn on the television. They talk to someone about anything, because the silence of one's own presence can seem dizzying when you've spent your whole life believing that you were the thoughts and not what thinks them. You grew up learning to identify with what happened, with the stories they told about you, with the adjectives they attached to your name, with what you achieved or didn't achieve, with what someone said about you on a Thursday afternoon when you were 12 years old and never forgot. You learned to be the content, but no one ever showed you the container. Think about the space in this room, where you are right now. The walls exist. The objects exist. You exist within this space. But what is space itself? Not the walls, not the objects, not you. Space itself, that nothingness that allows everything to exist. What is it? It has no color. It has no texture. It has no visible beginning or end. And yet, without him, nothing could exist. No form, no movement, no encounter. Space doesn't interfere with what happens inside it. It doesn't judge objects. It doesn't prefer the chair to the window. It isn't disturbed when someone knocks on the door. The space only contains. Consciousness is like that. It is the inner space in which all experience takes place. Every thought that arises, she contains it without being the thought itself. Every emotion that passes, she feels it without becoming the emotion. Every scene of life, she observes it without being the scene. And here's something worth pausing to appreciate. If you can observe a thought, you are not the thought. If you can perceive an emotion, you are not the emotion. If you can recognize that you're afraid, it's not the fear that's noticing. The observer and the observed are never the same thing. And you're always the observer, not what is observed. But here begins the paradox, because if you are the observer, then what you observe is a reflection of who you believe yourself to be. Reality is not a fixed place that you visit. It is a responsive surface, a screen that responds to the observer's frequency. And the observer's frequency is determined by one thing: because of the identity he carries. Identity is not the name on your documents. It's not your profession. It's not the story you tell when someone asks who you are. Identity is the feeling of being. It is the answer that lives in the body, not in the mind, to the silent question, what am I? If deep down, beneath all the layers of history and character, there is a feeling of incompleteness, the world will confirm that feeling, not out of cruelty, not by chance, but because reality is a perfect mirror. A mirror doesn't create what it shows, it only reveals. And that's life. What you find out there, in people, in circumstances, in recurring patterns, is not a conspiracy of the universe against you. It is a true portrait of what dwells within the observer. And here the script changes, because if reality is a mirror, then transformation doesn't begin outside of it. It begins with who is looking, not as effort, not as forced discipline, not as a list of things you need to fix about yourself, but as recognition, like the silent realization that you, as an observer, possess a nature that predates all history, a nature that has not been harmed, that does not need approval, that is not incomplete. And when the observer changes, not as a performance, but as a genuine change in the sense of being, the mirror changes too. This is not a metaphor. It is the structure of the experience. Consciousness is not passive. It does not receive reality like someone receiving a letter in the mail. Consciousness actively participates in the creation of what it perceives. Quantum physics came close to pointing this out. The idea that the act of observing influences what is observed. But this is not just a curiosity of physics. It is a description of lived experience. At every moment, the observer that you are is shaping the texture of the world you inhabit, not the observer you claim to be when someone asks. The observer that you truly are in the silence of perception. Who is here now, at this moment, experiencing this conversation? That's the only question that matters. There's a very common idea about inner transformation. The idea that transformation takes time, that it's a long, gradual process, made up of years of work. And perhaps there is truth in that, in some respects, in some ways. But there is another possibility. The possibility is that this is the only time when real change happens. Now. Not the now of tomorrow, not the now after meditation, after the retreat, after therapy, after the crisis. This one now, the only one that exists, the only one that has ever existed. The past is memory, and memory is thought happening now. The future is anticipation, and anticipation is thought happening now. The only place where reality truly exists is here. It is in this moment without thickness, in this infinitesimal point between what was and what is not yet, and it is here, exactly here, that the observer resides, not in the past of who he was, not in the future of who he plans to be. Here, if the observer resides here, and if reality responds to the observer, then the only change that matters is what happens here, not as a mental effort, as a presence, like the simple act of returning to direct perception before the story about it begins. There is a space between the stimulus and the reaction, a very small space, almost invisible in the speed of everyday life, but it exists. And in that space, however small it may be, there is freedom. There is choice, not the calculated and deliberate choice of the intellect, but the silent choice of which observer will respond. The observer conditioned by the past, or the observer who exists before all conditioning. That distinction is everything. Perhaps you've arrived here carrying something, a feeling that something needs to change, a weariness of being who you've been, a longing for something you can't yet name. This is the invitation, not the problem. The invitation. Life hasn't disturbed you because something is wrong with you. Life has disturbed you because the observer that you are is ready to recognize something that was waiting to be seen. And what needs to be seen is not in the past. It's not in history. It's not in the trauma or the wound or the repeating pattern. It's here, in the nature of the observer himself. You are not what happened to you. You are not what you thought you were. You are not what others said you were. You are not even what you tell yourself when you are alone in the dark. You are the one listening to this right now. What is here before any thought about it even begins? And this thing, this presence that is here, it doesn't need to be constructed. It's not an achievement. It's not the result of years of practice. It's not a high state you need to reach. She is what you are when you stop believing you are something else. This may sound too simple, and it is. Simplicity is exactly where the mind stops, because the mind has been trained to seek complexity, to be suspicious of what is easy, to believe that depth requires effort. But there are depths that only reveal themselves when you stop digging, when you stand still, when you let the surface become still, and then, not through effort, but through stillness, you begin to see what has always been here. The observer that you are has nothing to prove. There is nothing left to achieve. There's no destination to reach before being complete. It is already complete. Like space is complete. Like silence is complete. Like consciousness is complete, regardless of what happens within it. And when you begin to feel it, not as a concept, but as a lived truth, something changes, not dramatically, not with fanfare, but like a slight reduction in weight, like the feeling that you no longer need to carry something that was never yours. Reality doesn't change first. The observer changes first, and then reality, faithful as it has always been to the observer, begins to reflect something different. You're going to close this video in a little while, and life will go on with its stimuli, its demands, its own rhythm, the same people, the same situations, but perhaps, who knows, you'll find them in a slightly different place, not because you learned something new, but that's because you recognized something old. The consciousness that is here now is the same consciousness that was here when you were 5 years old and looked at the sky without needing to name what you felt. The same one who was here during those improbable moments of silence amidst the chaos. the same one that will be here when all thoughts dissolve and only this remains. This is now, not a concept, not a practice, the very essence of the experience, the observer who never left. You don't need to go anywhere to find it. You don't need to become someone else. There's no need to resolve the past first. There's no need to wait for the circumstances to improve. You just need to notice what you're noticing and stay, just for a moment, here